Brilliant. A wedyn ymddiheriadau. Wedyn ni. Mod i ddim yn gallu just aros. A fydden ni'n cael... Sut allwn ni accessio hwnna i greu gair?
Mi fydda i'n rhannu fo efo pob wedyn. Unrhyw un sydd ar yr e-bost, yeah. So just a reminder that we are recording this event, and I will be sharing the recording with anyone that's present at the moment, and it will be shared on our social media and our newsletter for anyone that has missed this evening. I put myself on mute then, somehow. Okay, we've got 24 people. Rob, do you think we can begin?
Yeah, I think let's begin, and people might join as we.
Great. So, diolch yn fawr I chi gyd am fod yma heno. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Becca, dwi yn... mi o'n I yn gweithio I Ynni Cymunedol Cymru wan, dwi'n gwirfoddoli. I'm Becca. I was working for Community Energy Wales, and now I'm volunteering this evening. Yn anffodus, oherwydd bod cyfieithu ar y pryd yn logistical nightmare ar bethau fel hyn, mi fydd gweddill y cyfarfod yn Saesneg. So please, maddiwch iddyn ni. Unfortunately, translation on the go is logistically a nightmare for online events, so the rest of this event will be in English. Croeso I chi ofyn cwestiynau yn y Gymraeg, a mi na I cyfieithu i'r panelist. You're welcome to ask a question in Welsh if you would like, and I will translate it to the panelists. So just some housekeeping. If there's any technical issues, please just contact me via the chat function at the bottom of the screen. If you click chat, it should come up on the right. And I suggest that everyone, except for our speakers, turns off their video. Just for broadband purposes, it's just easier to stream without everyone on their videos. So everyone except our speakers should remain on mute, and even our speakers when they're not speaking. If you have any questions or comments during the event, can you please pop them in the group chat on the right, and make sure that the to section is to everyone, otherwise some people might not see the questions. I will be then asking these questions to the panelists at the end of the event, so please can you note who your question is for as well. And after the event I will share all the slides with everyone present and the recording of the event. So that's housekeeping, so without further ado we'll just get going. Rob?
Great, diolch Becca. Thanks Becca. I'm just going to share my screen quickly, just because I've got a couple of slides. Then I'll get going. Hopefully that'll work. Okay, yeah. So. I'll just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Rob Proctor. I'm Business Development Manager for Community Energy Wales. I'm also the Director of a community energy organisation called Untitled, and I'm a member of several community energy organisations across Wales. So just to give you a very brief background of Community Energy Wales. So Community Energy Wales was set up to support the community energy sector in Wales. It was set up by community energy practitioners in order to represent them in Wales and to help develop a network of community energy organisations across Wales. We are putting on this event as part of Community Energy Fortnight. So there's a whole fortnight of events going on across the UK. and this is one of the many events going on at the moment. So if you're interested in finding out more, there's still a few more days left of Community Energy Fortnights of different events going on, and obviously at the moment they're all online, so easily accessible from anywhere. I just thought it'd be useful just to give a bit of background about the community energy sector. At the start of Community Energy Fortnight, Community Energy England and Community Energy Wales, we jointly published the State of the Sector report, which is basically an annual report that just gives an update on the community energy sector across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So I've just put up a slide just to give you sort of an indication of the key key facts and figures, really, just to give you an idea of the scale of community energy across Wales, England and Northern Ireland. So communities own around 193 megawatts of electricity generation. That might not mean a lot to some people, but that's around about enough power to provide around about enough power for around about 80,000 homes. There's 300 community energy organisations across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. In Wales, that's around about sort of 45 or so, around about that. And within the sector, there's 234,000 people who are involved, engaged in the sector, 93,000 volunteers, and as a sector we employ around about 263 people, full-time equivalent people. And in the last year, the community energy sector contributed around about £4.6 million in terms of local economic benefits, so in terms of grants, support to projects, etc., community benefit funds, those sorts of things. So that's the sort of, that's what local economic benefit the community energy sector provided. And in the last year, community energy organisations raised around about £35 million to develop the projects, the most recent projects. And around about 5 million of that was through community share offers. So that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. And so community share offers traditionally have been one of the main ways that community energy projects have raised finance for these multi-million-pound projects that they're involved with. And I guess the reason for that is partly it's a good way of raising money, partly it's a way of engaging your local community, and I guess one of the things about community energy is that we want to support local economies. So rather than paying interest to banks and that money leaving our communities, if we can borrow money from within our communities and then pay the interest back to our communities, that keeps money circulating in the local community. So because we want to promote share offers and we want to promote people investing in community energy projects and retaining that value in the local economy, we decided to set up a Wales's community investment network. So some of you may already be aware of CyfraNi. Some of you might have heard about this event through CyfraNi, but basically, because we want as many people as possible to, or as much of the money as possible to support it, to invest in Welsh projects, we want as much of it to be from within Wales as possible. And we decided to set up the CyfraNi network to really promote the opportunities within Wales and make sure that people in Wales are aware of those opportunities. So at the moment, we've got around about 800 people so they've signed up to the CyfraNi mailing list. So if you're not on the CyfraNi mailing list, then I would highly recommend that you do sign up so you can make sure you do hear about all these opportunities coming up in the future. And if you are already part of it, then please do share it with other people you know and encourage people to find out more and potentially consider supporting some of these projects. As Becca said, we'll also be recording this event. So if you know of people who aren't able to make it, then please do share it with them. So I guess without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jeremy Thorpe, to give us an overview of what a community share offer is, and then we'll have the opportunity to hear from a number of organisations that either have or are going to have share offers coming up in the future. So I'll hand over to you, Jeremy. And I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thanks so much, Rob. I will try and share my screen as well now. See if it works. Right. How are you seeing? Are you seeing the right thing? Are you seeing a slide now? Okay, jolly good. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about just community shares from a fairly general and fairly basic standpoint. I was told to start from a fairly assuming that people don't know very much about shares, so apologies in advance if I'm teaching my grandmother to suck eggs at all, but here we go then. So anyway, I'm Jeremy Thorpe from an organisation called Sharenergy. How do I move on to the next slide on this? There we go. So I work for an organisation called Sharenergy. We were a spin-off from Energy for All back in 2011, and Energy for All were the organisation that really started off the community energy industry in the UK, where they were involved in the first wind turbine project up in Cumbria called Bay Wind, and they've developed lots of big wind community energy projects since then. So we were spun off really in order to help develop schemes other than wind, but we've also been involved in some wind projects as well. We're based in Shrewsbury and have 8 people, and mainly what we do are 2 things. We help community energy projects to raise capital by helping them to run a community share offer. We also provide an administration service to do the day-to-day running of the society once the project is up and running. So the sort of dealing with members, preparing accounts, doing the bookkeeping and so on. So I'm going to start from sort of the basics. What is a registered society? Pretty well all community energy schemes in the UK are run from a registered society, which is different from a company. A lot of people get them confused. So just to distinguish a society from a company, societies are registered with the FCA rather than through Companies House. Whereas a company has mem and arts, the society has a set of rules which include all of the ways that the society is required to operate. And those rules that have written into them the values and principles of the cooperative movement, really, in terms of democracy and all the rest of them. So there is embedded in the rules of the society. There are 2 distinct forms of registered society, cooperatives and community benefit societies. They're quite similar in most respects, the main difference being that cooperatives are set up really for the benefits of their members, and community benefit societies are set up for the benefit of the community. Now, in the early days of community energy, most of the societies that were set up as cooperatives, but in a few years, 3 or 4 years ago, the FCA decided that to be a cooperative, one really had to be able to trade with your members, because that community energy schemes generally can't actually trade with their members. That is, they can't buy and sell electricity from their members. But the FCA no longer allow community energy schemes to register as cooperatives. So recently, all of the new schemes have been set up as community benefit societies. But the 2 are basically very, very similar. The rules will be very similar for them both. Just one point of confusion, they do have limited liability, so it may well be known as such and such a cooperative limited, and that basically means that they have limited liability, which means that if they go wrong, anyone that's got shares in a cooperative can lose the value of their shareholding. They won't get any money back from their shares, but they won't be liable to pay anything further than that. If it was just a private scheme, then potentially they could end up owing creditors more money than the value of their shares. So it can be known as something cooperative limited. And the main difference between a society and a company is that societies exist for the benefit of the members or a community, whereas the purpose of a company is to benefit shareholders. And we'll come back to that a bit later, but that's what you have to bear in mind, that companies are really there to serve their shareholders and societies are not. Although societies have shareholders, they are in many ways not the most important people in the society. The most important people are the members and the community it serves. Right, so what are community shares? So they are non-transferable shares in a registered society. And this is quite an important distinction. Societies have a special exemption from something called the Financial Services Marketing Act. If a company wants to run a public share offer, that is sell shares to the general public, they have to comply with this Marketing Act, which basically means they have to put their share offer together with oversight from people as accountants and lawyers that are accredited or vetted by the FCA. And that makes doing a public share offer for a company very expensive, sort of in the region of £50,000 or more, which would be out of the realm of the type of small share offers that a community energy scheme would want to do. So societies are exempt from that, which means that we can run share offers without having all of that due diligence and oversight by the FCA, which means that it becomes viable to actually put a share offer together for a fairly modest sum that's in line with the amount of money that we're looking to raise. But there are some conditions. That exemption comes with some conditions, which I'll go on to. So we can raise shares, non-transferable shares, under that exemption, and we can pay interest on those shares in a similar way to companies pay dividends on shares in the company. Societies have members, and basically the condition of being a member of a society is that you hold a share. So in many ways, being a shareholder and being a member means exactly the same thing. But in societies, the members get a say on the basis of one member, one vote, whereas in companies, it's generally one share, one vote. Much in the same way as a company, interest can only be paid if the society is making profits cover it. In the case of a company, it's actually illegal for a company to pay dividend on shares if it's not making a profit. It's not quite a legal requirement in the same sense for a society, but good practice dictates that we follow the same guidelines as companies, and therefore a society would only pay interest if it's making a profit to cover that interest. So the shares are withdrawable but not transferable. In a company, the shares are transferable, which means that if I buy some shares in a company, I can then sell them on to someone else. But in a society, the only thing you can do is to sell the shares back to the society. And the society doesn't have to, if it's got a cash flow problem, it doesn't have to agree to buy them back, but that's in theory the only thing that you can do with them. And the consequence of that is that they don't increase in value. If a share in a company, you buy a share in a company, you expect that share to increase in value or sometimes decrease in value. But shares in a society will stay valued at the same price you paid for them, unless the society gets into trouble, in which case they may fall in value, but they can't go up in value. And there's a limit on how many shares one individual can buy. And those last three items are really the conditions that the FCA makes in return for having the exemption from the Financial Services Marketing Act. So they're sort of similar to company shares with a few conditions. Another quite important condition is that we as societies can pay interest on shares, but the FCA requires that that interest is not what it would see as excessive. If a company, you set up a company and you've got some shareholders in the company and the company is incredibly profitable, you can pay the shareholders as much interest as you like, and there's no rules about it. But for a society, because the society exists for the benefit of the community and for members, you can't pay share interest other than what would be deemed fair interest that is sufficient to get people interested in buying shares in the first place. So if there's any surplus, it would go to a community fund. But terminology, just because people tend to get confused over interest and dividends. If companies issue shares, they then pay dividends to their shareholders, which is just a payout every year in proportion to how many shares you've got in that company. For societies, the terminology is a bit different. Societies can pay dividends, but a dividend is a payment made in proportion to the amount you've traded with that society. So if we take something like the cooperative retail shops, you become a member of the co-op stores by buying 1 share for £1, but then you get a dividend which will be based on how much food you've purchased from that shop over a year. So your dividend is not based on, whoops, what's happened there? So that dividend is not based on how many shares you've got, but how much you've bought from the shops. Societies can also pay interest, and the interest is what you pay, what they pay based on how many shares you've got. Now, because I said earlier that all of the recent community energy societies are community benefit societies, they don't trade with their members. So in fact, community benefit societies can't pay dividends at all because they don't trade. The only thing they pay is interest. But we have to talk about it as interest, not a dividend. A lot of people refer to what we pay out as dividends, which is not correct. So if you've got a energy scheme, you've found your site and you've done your feasibility work and you've come up with a viable scheme, you need to raise the capital to build it. So the various different forms of capital that you could use are community shares, and a very large number of the schemes have over the last few years have been funded entirely with community shares. There's some other options that you might consider. Community bonds, which are a bit like shares, and I will just say a bit about what they are and what the difference is between those as shares. Commercial loans, and I'll say a little bit about commercial loans. And you have always the option of raising private loans on whatever terms you choose to offer to those people wanting to lend you money. And transferable shares. Now, when I said at the beginning, community shares were shares in registered societies. Registered societies can issue transferable shares, but the transferable shares don't come with the exemption from that Financial Services Marketing Act. So you would have to do an expensive share offer, which means that most energy schemes don't do that. They just issue the non-transferable shares. But some large projects would consider issuing a share offer for transferable shares, because although if it's a multi-million-pound share offer, because although putting the share offer together is a lot more expensive, it can have benefits in that it may make the shares more attractive to, for instance, institutional investors, because they know that it has gone through the additional vetting, and also things like independent financial advisors aren't allowed to recommend non-transferable shares because they haven't gone through the vetting process. So if you wanted to have your shares recommended by an IFA, then you would have to issue transferable shares. So some very big schemes have, but in the main, they don't. So the top 3 are usually the ones used. So in addition to community shares, these are the community bonds, and they are a bit similar to shares, but effectively they are offered at a fixed interest rate, whereas a share, community share, you pay according to how much profit or rather you only pay if you're making a profit. So if you're not making a profit in the first few years, you wouldn't pay any interest. If you offer a bond, then you say at the start, these will be paid 5% interest every year, and that is what you have to stick to. It's a liability, and if you didn't pay it, it would end up as being a liability on your balance sheet. So bond interest is fixed and is a debt. Bondholders don't become members, whereas shareholders do become members. And if the society got into trouble, your yield wasn't as much as you were hoping for, so you're not making any profit. you are due to pay the bond interest and to repay the bond capital, even if you're not making a profit, even if that means that you never pay any interest to shareholders, even if that means the shareholders don't get their capital back. So bondholders take precedence over shareholders in terms of getting their money back if there's any problems. But the flip side is that normally you would offer a much lower interest rate on the bonds, so that the shares are sort of high risk, high return, bond interests are lower risk, lower return. So you've also got the option of a commercial loan, which is a bit like a bond, fixed interest, and it's a liability, but that would take precedence over everything else. That's if the society gets into trouble, it would be the commercial lender that would take their money out first, and if there's any left over, it would be given to the bondholders, and if there's any left over after that, it would be given to the shareholders. So it's worth bearing in mind that sequence of priority of the different capital that goes into a project. Commercial loans, unless it's quite a large project, commercial loans are difficult to get because they will require quite a lot of due diligence to put in place. So they're fairly costly, and they're only worth it if you're lending, if you're borrowing quite a large amount of money, sort of in the region of £1 million or so. It's quite difficult to get for small amounts. It's quite important to understand the way that shares and bonds interact, because generally, if you look at the graph at the bottom there, that's typically what happens with your community energy scheme. The income, that's the sort of, if you assume that graph is over a 20-year period, the income will gradually rise over the 20 years, and generally will rise quicker than your expenditure. And there are reasons for that I won't go into now, but generally that's what happens. So in the first few years, you may not be making much of a profit at all. You may even be making a loss for a couple of years, but then fairly soon your income will start to get quite a lot in excess of your expenditure, and you will make a lot of profit in the later years. And so you can pay quite a reasonable amount of share interest in the later years that makes up for the fact they didn't get much in the early years. If you have bonds, because bonds have to pay interest from the very start, and that interest is part of your expenditure, so it basically makes your expenditure higher. It means that you have to wait longer before you get into a positive profit situation. So if you stir some bonds into the pot, you will find that the point at which you can start paying share interest gets a bit later. The amount of interest that you can probably pay later increases, but it does delay when you can start to repay both bonds, both share capital and share interest. So there's a limit to how many bonds you can put in. It's not a good idea to have lots of bonds and loans and not very much shares, because it ends up with the shareholders taking all of the risk and having their returns very late in the day. So just a roundup on community shares. Lots of societies raise their capital from community shares. Typically, you will get people, on average, it will be something like £2,000 is what we find is an average amount that people will invest. But that average covers quite a large range, so that a lot of people will invest a small amount, sort of £100 or £200. You'll get a few people investing quite large sums, sort of £10,000, £20,000. So there's a big range of how much people put into these schemes. But typically it's about 2,000, and so for a larger scheme, a sort of £500,000 scheme, you'll have a few hundred shareholders on that basis. They're generally not restricted on geography, although you could do if you wanted to, but most don't. And typically you find a lot of people, there will be, say, half of them that are local people that have bought shares from within the local community, but there are quite a few people that are just keen on community energy and will buy shares from projects from quite a distance. So there will be quite a lot of members and shareholders that come in that hear about it via newsletters and on the internet that will buy it even if they're not within the local community. And as Rob says, they're a good thing because they keep money circulating in the local economy. In terms of the amounts that people can invest, usually the society would set a lower limit, and that's really on the basis of you don't want to add to your administration costs too much. So if you had hundreds and hundreds of £1 shareholders, it just wouldn't it would cost you too much in admin. So typically this has a lower limit of of £100 or £250, and there's a legal limit of 100,000. And good practice is that you don't have any shareholders that hold more than 10% of the total issued share capital. So that's a very rapid canter through the background behind community shares. So hopefully there'll be lots of questions that come out of that. So I'm very happy to, somebody saying to draw to close anyway. So yeah, there we go. That's the end of it. Very happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. I think we'll go on to hear a bit more about the actual projects. You've got share offers live or will have share offers at the moment. So the first one we're going to is Dan McCallum of Egni Co-op. So I'll hand over to you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Rob. So we've got a share offer open at the moment. The details are on www.egni.coop. Yeah, so as Jeremy was saying, it's sort of set out in the share offer document, the kind of detail of the projects. But ours is a rooftop solar co-op. So we pre-registered a lot of sites across Wales for the feed-in tariff, which was a kind of exemption available to community organisations. So, and then we started raising money, and then it was all a bit last minute, really. A lot of the installations actually happened from January to March earlier this year. So it was very, very busy. We managed to install about 2.2 megawatts on about 85 sites. But you can believe it, like we had a feed-in tariff deadline at the end of March. And suddenly all these schools and community buildings. And then, of course, COVID struck. I was just thinking, this is just unbelievable. But luckily, we did manage to get most of the sites installed. And they're kind of now generating. But it was a real roller coaster, as a lot of these projects are. And then fortunately as well, literally on the 31st of March, the government extended the feed-in tariff. So we're now busy installing more sites that we didn't manage to do before the end of March. It doesn't really affect the kind of financial underpinning of the project. The more we install, the better it is really for climate change and sort of reducing risk because we've got more sites. But it certainly does help with the sort of provisions under the feed-in tariff on our project. Yeah, so I think we've just completed 100 kilowatts on a site in Newport, Carleon Comprehensive, and then we've got the scaffolding back up actually on Newport Velodrome, and that will be the largest solar array in Wales, which is at 500 kilowatts. I should say actually the Geraint Thomas Newport Velodrome. So that's very exciting, and that starts on the 29th of June. Yeah, and then we've got quite a few other sites. So it's a range of locations, schools, working with local authorities, some community buildings, and about 3 or 4 businesses that we managed to get an agreement with, and then agree a lease. So I think that's all I've got to say. Probably more questions are on our website, answers to the questions, and then happy to take questions at the end, Rob.
Great, thank you, Dan. So yeah, we're just going to do a quick whiz through of from the different community organisations, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions at the end. So I'm going to hand over now to Peter Davis from Pembrokeshire Community Energy. You're on mute, Peter.
Yeah, right. I'm now off mute. Sorry about that. Good. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, I have got a slide to share, but I think I'll just talk to it rather than spend time getting it up. Yeah, I chair Community Energy Pembrokeshire. Took on the chairing of that in 2016. It's a community interest company dedicated to promoting community energy across Pembrokeshire, and I know there are a couple of colleagues on the call who are involved in one of our projects, the Local Energy Action Force project, but the community interest company was primarily focused initially on being established to take forward a community wind turbine, which dates back to 2006. It's an instructive story in terms of how such a project can take such a long time to develop, and the story is actually on our website, and I'll put a link on the chat so that you can see the full story. But in terms of establishing the wind turbine, we've set up a cooperative, Renewable Power Pembrokeshire, as the vehicle for constructing and operating the turbine. The turbine was commissioned by the end of March, and so we've had 2 and a bit months of the turbine operating. It's an EWT turbine. It's a new turbine that was put up by EWT through the wettest winter that we've had, so lots of challenges in getting it up. It's on Prouts Park Farm with David Nash, who's the landowner, and for those of you who might know, that's part of Pembrokeshire. It's not far from Manor Park Zoo, down outside of Tenby. We were able to get financing from Development Bank of Wales, who financed the capital for the construction of the turbine, but that financing was on the condition of us running a share offer once the turbine was up and running. So we have a plan to launch a share offer and a prospectus in September. We'll be working with Jeremy and Sharenergy to manage that process. So we don't actually have a prospectus ready as it stands, but we're anticipating a 4% return, interest return, as being the basis for that share offer. I should just say that we did benefit a lot from the professional advice that we had from Welsh Government Energy Service, and so it's a completely volunteer-led exercise, but we've had really good professional input from Welsh Government Energy Service to get us to the point where we now have a community wind turbine operating and ready to go for a share offer. I can now sort of press the chat button to make sure I can get up the email. Oh, I think Ruth has done it already for me. Sorry, thank you, Ruth. So on the chat button is the link to the website, and there is a form that you can complete to register, sort of pre-registration interest in the share offer. Thank you, Rob.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Okay, I'm going to swiftly move on, and Grant Peasley is going to, from Untitled, is going to speak to you now.
Hi, lovely to see so many people on the call. Great to weld pawb yma. Dwi'n mynd I wneud bob ddim yn Saesneg, ond I'm just cychwyn yn Cymraeg, felly da chi'n gallu gofyn cwestiwn os ti isio. Everything I say is going to be in English, but if you want to ask any questions in Welsh afterwards, then I'm happy for that. And because I can speak both languages, I can answer them both as well. Ideal. Untitled is a benefit society that was set up in 2016-17. We developed a EWT wind turbine in Carmarthenshire in a very short period of time. We had about 6 months to fit into a fit deadline, and that was all done by August 2017. It's a lovely looking turbine, let me tell you. 40-metre tower, 54-metre blades. It's beautiful, and it makes enough energy for about 650 homes every year, or thereabouts. It cost us £1.8 million. That was initially raised through loans But since then, we've done 3 fundraisers with a share offer that raised £500,000. That happened in 2017, I think just into 2018 as well. And we've had 2 bond offers since then. Each bond offer has raised 200,000 each, so that's 400,000 that we no longer have to pay loan costs on. The loans were at about 7%. The bond offer return is at 4%. So this has freed up some extra money for our community funds, of which we've so far given £20,000 to local initiatives. About half of that has gone to the local school to help them develop an outdoor education area. We've had a few thousand went to a church to help them with their electrics. Local community hall has had some repairs done. The council's fixing up footpaths, some more repairs on another community centre. And just recently, with COVID lockdown and the difficulties that many people are struggling with without being able to work, etc., we decided to give £2,000 to Carmarthen Food Bank as well. We also at Unitag run some other services as well that have developed out of this. So we have a development service, and that helps others to start their own community energy developments. We also can help with shared ownership schemes, which builds on the Welsh Government's shared ownership initiative that they've started this year. And we've begun a new community benefit society called Uni Newydd, and that's developing a very large, I think will be the largest in Wales, definitely solar on land solar array. That probably won't be built for a couple of years yet. So we're planning with Unitag to have another bond issue. We haven't yet agreed the full details of it. It's unlikely that we'll offer 4% return this time round, but there's some arm wrestling to do by the directors to decide exactly how that will work. But keep an eye out for it later in the summer when we start on that. Thanks, Rob.
Great, thanks, Grant. And I'm going to now hand over to Sarah Merrick of Ripple Energy, who've got quite a new, I guess, innovative proposal for you all.
I'll mute myself. Hiya. So yes, I'm Sarah Merrick, CEO of Ripple Energy. I'm going to give you an overview of our new project. So our mission, background to Ripple first, our mission is to make clean energy ownership affordable and accessible to everyone, everywhere. How we do that is that we enable people to own a tiny part of a large-scale wind farm and have the clean, low-cost electricity that it generates supplied to their homes. So unlike lots of other community energy schemes, Ripple's co-op is an actual co-op. It's not a community benefit fund, because there is trading possible, because each individual basically trades with the co-op their electricity. So what we do is our first wind farm, is open at the moment. It is Craigfather. It's about 12 miles northwest of Cardiff. It's a 2.5 megawatt wind turbine, which can supply around sort of 2,300 households. And what happens, what happens is we've got an exclusive partnership with Co-op Energy, who are powered by Octopus. And what happens is each individual member joins the Craigfather Cooperative Society, and they switch on our website. We do the switch for them. We switch them to a Co-op Energy tariff. They just choose which tariff they want to be switched to. They then own as many shares in the wind farm as what they need. So they just put into our website what their electricity consumption is. We then say, okay, you need to own 1,200 watts of the wind farm or 1,500 watts or whatever it is. The minimum ownership is the equivalent of £250 worth. The maximum is £100,000 worth. For a typical household, given their typical consumption, they would need to own around £1,800 to own enough of the wind farm to generate 2.9 megawatt hours, which would be their annual consumption. So you own as many watts of the wind farm as you need. We then manage the build. Once the project is fully subscribed, we manage the build on behalf of the co-op. Then when the wind farm's operating, Octopus Energy on behalf of co-op buys the electricity from the wind farm and supplies it to the owners' homes. Now, because Octopus, because the wind farm has basically been built with people's 100% equity, there's no finance to pay off. So Octopus, instead of buying the wind farm's electricity at the wholesale price, which would tend to be a lot higher, it can buy it at the wind farm's operating costs. And the difference between the two is basically the saving that Octopus realises, and they pass that on to the owners of the wind farm. And that's why there is this trading element, because effectively the more watts you own, the more electricity your share generates each year, so then the greater your savings are on your bill. We simply tell Octopus each month how much each owner's share of the wind farm is generated, and then they get the savings applied to their bill automatically. So once you put your money into the project, your savings are just applied automatically. There isn't any dividend. The savings is partly repayment of share capital and then interest. But the benefit of being a member of the co-op is that you get cheaper electricity as opposed to a dividend from the co-op. So there's no dividend expected from the co-op, basically. So yeah, our first wind farm, Greg Father, is open for ownership at the moment. So go and check out our website, rippleenergy.com, and all the details there. So we've got obviously the share offer document is there, more explainers of how the model works is there. But this is the first time ever consumers in the UK can actually own their own large scale asset and get supplied with clean electricity that it generates. So we sort of want it to be a sort of much more affordable option to rooftop solar. So typically it's around sort of 65% cheaper than the equivalent rooftop solar scheme. Obviously it's not behind the meter, but you know, we want clean energy ownership to be affordable for everyone, and we don't think that often rooftop solar is available, so that we've come up with this model so that it is genuinely affordable for everyone. So that's a very quick run through of Ripple.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I'm just going to quickly mention another sort of upcoming opportunity that Community Energy Wales are involved with. Just hold on a minute, because I'm a host, lots of different things are happening on my screen. So hopefully you can see the screen there. So one of the things that's one of Welsh Government policies in Wales that's started this year is that every new renewable energy project should have an element of local ownership with it. So what it might mean is there could be a lot of opportunities in the future for communities or other local based organisations to partner with a larger developer in order to have a stake in their energy projects. So at Community Energy Wales, we've partnered with Energy on a 30 megawatt wind farm in the Alwyn's Forest, which is on the border between Conwy and Denbighshire. What we've agreed with them is that we would have the opportunity to have a 15% stake in that project, and then there would be the opportunity for people to invest in that project. It would be a revenue share agreement, so 15% of the revenue would then come to the Community Benefit Society, and any profit that the Community Benefit Society makes can then be used for community benefits. So, you know, I think there'll probably be more of those sorts of opportunities coming up in Wales over the coming years. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on. And if you want to be kept up to date with that, then you need to sign up to the CyfraNi mailing list. So that I just wanted to quickly mention that. Okay, so we have some time for questions. So I'm having, I'll just have a look through here. So we've got one from Patrick Nash. So what's the estimated return on investment on your ownership in terms of savings, and can anyone join this co-op? I think, was that specifically at Sarah? I think that was directed at Sarah because it was while you were talking.
Yes, so it's all set out in the share offer document. Basically, it depends on what the electricity price is. So we've set out 3 different scenarios which are based on the UK government's assumptions on fuel price fuel prices going forward, basically. So the low, and I can't remember off the top of my head, it ranges from, I think, around sort of 1.5%, and then the higher one gets up to sort of 6-7% over the 25-year lifetime of the wind farm, but I'll have to check the exact numbers. But yeah, so essentially we're not guaranteeing a set return on the investment, because the investment is the return or the benefit is driven by the difference between the operating cost of the wind farm and the wholesale electricity price. Obviously, your return on your saving is dependent upon the difference between those two over the long term. But yeah, so we've set out a range in the share offer document, which we thought was the best way of just illustrating what is, you know, there's obviously a large sort of difference that it could be. So yeah, so we've set out just on a sort of scenario basis. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Sound drop.
Sorry. Grant, you had a comment about a project in Bethesda that had a different way around supplying energy locally, wasn't it? Well, you know, supplying energy to members and the community potentially. Do you want to quickly give an overview on that?
Yeah, well, in Bethesda, where Ernie Ogwen has developed a hydro scheme with 85% local people ownership and a little under £500,000 development. And the energy from that scheme is purchased by Octopus Energy, and through the clever use of smart meters with local households, the energy is virtually shared from that is generated amongst the some 160 odd houses in Bethesda using the energy local model. Slightly different, I think, is what Sarah said to me from what she was suggesting, where that of course you can live anywhere and take part of Ripple's opportunity, where in Bethesda it's just people who live there.
Yeah, so I think the energy local model is very, you know, benefits from that very local nature of the people that are, you know, they can avoid sort of grid charges and things like that if they're in the same substation zone. We want to make it accessible for everyone across the whole country, not Northern Ireland at the moment, but yeah, anywhere in England, Wales and Scotland, you can become an owner and get the savings passed on to your bill.
Great. So we have a question from Christopher Hall. So are all wind farms given a notional 25-year life in terms of accounting? I don't know if anyone wants to. Yeah.
So the answer is no. It's basically up to the board that put the share offer together to decide what life to give us a projection on their wind turbine and how many years you depreciate it over. If you can justify 25 years with a reasonable argument, then that's fine. I think a lot of them have just put in lifetimes of 20 years. But as it becomes more difficult to finance things and as the reliability of these things becomes better, I think that people are justifying longer lifetimes now, and I think 25 years is reasonable for a wind turbine. So yes, it's whatever you reasonably will expect the turbine to last, and it varies.
Thank you, Jeremy. We've got a message, a question from Patrick Nash for Sarah. Can businesses join the co-op as well? He's a director of a company located in Rhondda Cynon Taf.
Yes, so initially we were thinking the first project is just because it's a pilot, we want to keep everything really simple, and it wasn't going to allow businesses, but we have had interests from businesses, so we're looking at how they can do it. If the business is prepared to be a member of a co-op, then yes, it should be possible. So if you can just email me, just info@RippleEnergy, then we can look into it, and we would love businesses to be able to do it. I can also do the second one. So we're also looking at ways for people to be able to buy their shares through basically so that their employer, a bit like a bike to work scheme. So the employer loans whatever £2,000, £1,500 to the employee. That then enables them to buy their share in the co-op, and then they just repay the loan out of their salary every month over the course of 12 months. So yeah, that is a really, really important way for us to be able to make it accessible. Again, we weren't planning on having it available for the first project, but actually we've been able to develop the scheme a lot quicker than we thought. So again, if there are companies that want to offer it to their employees, it might be a bit clunky to begin with because it's not quite all completely polished yet. But yes, we want people to be able to offer this as an employee benefit to their employees for this first project. So again, just email info@rippleenergy.com, come straight through to me. So just get in touch if anyone wants to is interested in that.
Great. I don't know if anyone else has got any have any other projects have looked into whether people can pay monthly in any way or not.
Yeah. Can I say something on that? Yes, there have been a couple. I think that there was a solar project, the Oldham solar scheme gave people an option to pay by instalment, and I think that the one that the Hydro in Reading at the moment is allowing people to do so. Generally, the take-up has been fairly low on those, and it's not ideal from the point of view of the society, because if you're building a basically they're raising the money to pay for a large capital investment, and it's no good getting the money in 12 months time. You need the money now to pay the installer, and if you're getting the money paid in installments, then you'd have to find a loan to cover that amount until those installments came in. So I agree that it is desirable from the point of view of inclusivity, but it doesn't actually work very well from the point of view of having to build something and pay for something at a fixed point in time. So yes, some people have tried it. There's not been a massive take up, and it's not an ideal way of funding a capital heavy project.
Can I add in there, Rob, as well? I don't remember who it was. I'm tempted to say Carmarthenshire Energy. I'm not sure if there's anybody here from Carmarthenshire. But during the time that their share offer was open, I think you were able to make smaller payments to add up to a total amount. So instead of having to have 250 quid to invest now, you could put in 50 quid a month out of your salary to get that 250.
Thank you, Grant. So some further clarification required from Christopher Hall. So at the moment he belongs to Co-op Energy and was required to join Octopus because of having his own solar panels to receive the feed-in tariff. He doesn't want to change his electricity provider. Will that be altered by joining a share offer? He sensed that with Ripple, but he wasn't 100% sure. So I could certainly say from most community share offers, it doesn't affect it doesn't affect your energy provider, but with Ripple it would do. So Sarah, you might want to explain that.
Yeah. So in order for there to be a contractual link between the wind farm and your home electricity tariff, you have to be with one of our suppliers. So at the moment, we've got an exclusive partnership with Co-op Energy powered by Octopus. So you have to be either on a Co-op or an Octopus tariff. In the longer term, not in the long term, in the relatively short term, we're planning on having up to 8 suppliers. So you'll be able to partner. So we'll partner with up to 8 suppliers. That means you'll be able to switch between those 8. So we don't want people to, it's not very healthy for people to have to stay with one supplier for 25 years. So customers will be able to switch between our sort of pool of suppliers, still get their savings applied to whichever tariff they're on. We just shift that bit of the electricity from one supplier to another each month, basically. So yeah, you will always have to be with one of our suppliers, but we intend to expand out our pool of suppliers very, very quickly.
Great. And there is a question about the transferable nature or non-transferable nature of shares. So can shares be transferred in name for free to a spouse or dependent, either as a gift or on death of the owner? Jeremy?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yes, that is the one exception, that's on death of the member, the shares can be transferred via the will to whoever is quoted as a beneficiary of the will. That's the one exception. Yes.
Right, thank you very much for that. So we are just after 7 now. And I can't see any further questions coming up. So, oh, Becca has one, I think, or has just raised her hand to ask me something.
I just was asking, is it possible to buy shares for someone who's under 18? Like, could you possibly buy them for like a grandchild or your own children, or, you know, how does that work?
Okay, yes, I can cover this as well. This has been a bit of a headache for community energy projects. In some of the early schemes, there was people did put in options for you to buy shares on behalf of youngsters, and then the shares were transferred to them when they reached the age of 16. But this there were lots of twists and turns on this, and eventually people decided that that wasn't really acceptable, because it was transferring the shares, which went against the non-transferability issue. It can be done now under a slightly different mechanism. What happens now is that you can say when you apply for shares that you're buying them on behalf of a youngster under the age of 16, and the shares are issued in the name of the adult that's buying the shares. And then when the child reaches the age of 16, the society agrees to withdraw a set number of shares from the adult. Effectively allow the adult to cash in a set number of shares and reissue the same number of shares to the child that just turned 16 at the same price. So they're not transferred, it's a withdrawal and reissue. And that's the mechanism that's now being used, but it does allow societies to offer that. There are a few problems with it. If the member were to die before the child reached the age of 16, they couldn't transfer them to the child because the child wouldn't have reached the age of 16 yet. So it's complicated if that were to happen. But it's almost a solution.
And can I add a bit on that as well? So what we're looking at is a sort of gift option where somebody can create an account and then they can request, maybe for Christmas, can I have shares in this wind farm? And then people can almost sort of donate into their accounts, so that then at the end of Christmas they've got whatever, £200, £250 towards their wind farm. We can't wait for this to be the first thing on somebody's wedding list, where somebody gets married, they've got everything they need. People can just buy them shares of their wind farm, so that then, yeah, it's a lovely gift to have, for your wedding, basically.
Yes, yes. What I should say, following from that, is that you can buy shares for someone else as a gift. That's no problem with that. It doesn't matter where the money comes from. The one condition is that the person who the shares are being bought for has to agree to become a member. So they would have at some stage to sign something to say, yes, I agree to become a member.
Exactly. Yeah.
As long as that's done, then yes, you can fill in the form and say, these are these shares, I'm paying for them, but I want them to be in the name of someone else. Yes, absolutely.
I've got one last question, I think, and then I think we'll draw it to a close. So because we have gone a little bit over time.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a question from Christopher Hall for Sarah, and he wants clarification that he can belong to Octopus Energy and apply to Ripple Co-op.
But if you're already with Octopus, you can stay on whichever Octopus tariff you're on. If you're not, and that's including London Power, Effect Energy, Co-op Energy, obviously, and there's another one, Marks and Spencer's Energy. So if you're with it on any of those tariffs, you can just stay on them and your savings will just be applied automatically. If you're not with any one of those suppliers, say you're with E.ON, you will have to switch. We can only switch you to a Co-op Energy tariff, so you have to choose a Co-op Energy tariff. We then switch you to that tariff. So, but if you're already with Octopus, you can just stay on your tariff, whichever tariff it is. So if you're on Agile or Go, and your savings just get applied to your bill every month. Yeah, quite normal. That's fine.
Great, thank you. So we don't have any other questions. So I guess just leaves me to thank you all for coming, and thank you particularly to our contributors. and the community energy projects that shared information about their projects. So hopefully that was useful to you, and obviously, yeah, stay in touch, sign up to CyfraNi if you're not already signed up, and then you'll be able to hear about lots of different projects happening throughout Wales. Bye.
No problem, Becca.